All Wight County School Board's in session. Madam Clerk, please take a roll.
Mr. Colick,
Here.
Mr. Cunningham,
Here.
Mrs. Perkins,
Here.
Mr. Wooster,
Here.
and Mr. Marsh.
Here. Item 3.1.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda or amendments for open session.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Colick,
Yes.
Mr. Cunningham,
Yes.
Mrs. Perkins,
Yes.
Mr. Wooster,
Yes.
and Mr. Marsh.
Yes, motion passes. Mr. Vice Chair, item 4.1.
Would everyone please stand for a moment of silence and pledge of allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, Mr. Wooster. Good evening. It is February 27th. We're in Westside Elementary School, and we are here for our first budget working session for this year. In my opinion, approving the budget and adopting policy are this board's most important duties. On Monday, this board received the superintendent's formal and public presentation of his proposed budget. And again, tonight is our first formal and public work session to discuss what Dr. Kramer has proposed. But it's worth noting that individual board members, to include myself, have already begun working with staff in an effort to get a good understanding on the various requests. I think it's fair to say that the staff has a full plate this time of year as they're inundated by questions. Next week, Thursday, on March 6th, we'll be holding our required public hearing when we'll receive inputs from the citizens of Isle of Wight. For those citizens who cannot attend next week but have inputs or comments they'd like to provide, I'd encourage you to send an email and reach out directly to the board. This evening, I asked my fellow board members to consider focusing on this evening's work by asking questions and gathering information, not just for our own understanding, but for the listening audience as well. I think this is a huge part of being transparent and letting the county know what we are trying to spend hard-earned tax dollars on. And then we've got following meetings after the public hearing. I think we've all learned, I know I certainly have, and I continue to learn, that this budgeting process is difficult. There are no easy answers. Not everyone is always going to be happy, and we certainly won't always agree. But it's our job to consider how to best allocate our available resources to benefit the entire school division as best we can. And on that, we'll roll in right into the work session here, item 6, and I will turn it over to whoever wants to go first, because I usually speak too much anyway.
Mr. Chair, may I ask our staff to come to the dais, so the deputies, CFO, and Director of HR to start us off.
Any takers?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think the easiest thing to start with would probably be the capital improvement list that we've talked about for earlier this year. I think this would be probably the least contentious thing to get out there.
I would agree. Kick it off, sir, if you would.
Well, just to make it simple, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we adopt the first 5 items on the capital improvement list, which are a bus garage, funds for school bus replacement for 5 buses, a band room renovation, a weapons detection systems, and ADA bleachers to send to the Board of Supervisors for consideration into the county SIP.
I don't think we're at that point to take that step yet. I'd like to hear what Dr. Coleman has as updates on these before I do anything on them.
I'd be willing to second the motion, but certainly agree with Ms. Perkins that there's much discussion to be had.
Let's have some discussion on it. Absolutely.
Do you have specific questions, Ms. Perkins, or any member of the board regarding the CIP request?
Do you want to start with anything before we start asking questions, or?
I think, again, for this, in my mind, a lot of this is for the public watching, right? So I forget the slide number. It was presented on Monday. Do we have the slide number handy by chance?
It's in the back of the package. I don't have a number
Towards the
written.
tail end of it.
34.
Say it again.
I think it's page 34 that you're looking for.
This one, Doc.
Oh, that one. Yeah. There.
Was in the printout last time. So we can talk to it while we're finding Mr. Elliott,
Yeah.
do you by chance have that slide we can bring up? It's from Monday's presentation?
Mr. Cooprider?
He has to pull everything down and then back up. There he goes. Thank you.
It's third from the, where is it here?
There we go. Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll do a little backstory if everyone agrees. So everything on this list was presented last year, and I forget the total amount, but it was a significant amount of money that we had compiled. Dr. Coleman, keep me honest, it was somewhere in the ballpark of $14 or $15 million worth of capital improvement needs that we had identified. And last year, somewhere around this time, this board basically ranked them in a priority. Everybody took made a prioritized list, and we added up the numbers, and we ended up having a board's prioritized list. And last year, we presented all those needs to the county, and we were fortunate enough to get $9.5 million from the
That
county
is correct.
on top of the operating budget. So that was $9.5 million from Wight County, and they took out a bond, a county bond, and the lion's share of that bond funded the Carsville HVAC system. That was to the tune of Carrollton, to the tune of $7.5 million.
7.4 million, yes.
7.4 million. What else did we fund with that from last year? Do you recall?
Both athletic fields at the high schools and the tracks at the high schools also. So all of that went into the CIP for last year.
Yes, sir. And we got some weapons detection systems.
And weapons detection.
Right.
It was outstanding.
So it was awesome. So these are capital needs that have accumulated for years. Various needs, various expenses that had just snowballed, and we worked hard to identify those needs and start addressing them head on. So here we are a year later, and we've taken the items from last year that we didn't get funding for, and we've added one more item. That new item is an idea that I believe Dr. Coleman came up with, and that was to convert the unused boiler room at Smithfield High,
Right.
convert that over to an improved and larger band room,
Right.
and at the same time, that project would give us back a couple of classroom spaces in Smithfield High School, if I
In
believe.
Smithfield High School.
Right.
And I can go a little bit more in depth on that conversation.
Please do.
All right. Mr. Cooper, if you can pull up the slides. And if you could go to slide, I think it's going to be 4 or 5. All right. So what you're speaking of, Mr. Chair, is the band room renovation and other enhanced areas around the Smithville High School area. Now, of course, the main meat of the situation is the current band room, built in 1980, lacks the necessary acoustics, technology, and space to support the growing needs of the music program. But population of the music program is not everything. It's the other additives that it gives with the movement of this. Not only can we take a elective as of band and really revise the room to be more technological savvy and up to date. So we're taking a facility that was built in 1980 and we're converting it to a facility for 2025. So that would just let you know the different enhancements that will occur. Now, the outdated infrastructure affects sound quality, student engagement, of course, teacher effectiveness, insufficient storage, poor lighting, inadequate climate control that I know that each and every one of the board members have heard about this over and over again from the community. Now, additional expenses in other enhanced areas. We have the update and expand our current job coaching and postgraduate transition facilities. This is something that goes on every day at Smithville High School and throughout the division, but this is the area that we can, based off of moving the band room and expanded areas, this is one thing that can happen. Another thing that can happen is the therapy rooms. Therapy rooms, the current status attached to a classroom in inadequate space. As you already know, our SPED department, our teachers do a heck of a job at performing their duties on a daily basis, but not giving them the space and everything that they really adequately need. This band room renovation could assist. Expanded physical education classes, expanding the chorus room even. Per student request, additional fine arts classes and electives. That's something at Smithville High School. So this renovation of one area space, and I would like to go back to say dead space, because that's what this was. It was a room inside of Smithville High School that already had a roof, a floor, walls, the whole 9 yards. The current rate, as you're seeing another slide, for square footage for building a new commercial facility is $425 per square foot. So if we're gonna rebuild a new band room or something of that nature, we just like to keep those costs in mind. With renovating a space, those costs are reduced severely. So not only are we reducing the space and upgrading a elective as a band, we're having an opportunity to expand those current job coachings, the therapy rooms, and leave us other options that we can have right now at Smithville High School with electives.
So I think the point of all that is, if we were to summarize it, was that the proposal to refit a boiler room not only benefits the band, but there's also a lot of positive outcomes. It's not just about the band.
It's not just about the band.
And I would say that in a time when we're also looking at how we're going to replace the school that we're sitting in,
Right.
and whether or not we need to add on or reconfigure existing schools in the north end of the county, this is a huge part of that conversation.
It really is. It really is. And these are just the overall arching ideas, but when you get into the eaches of the project, when you get into the details, the weeds of the project, you will see more of these little heads popping out for cost savings and things that weren't planned, but because of this empty space being converted, now is a possibility.
Right.
Are we able to break this down into phases or anything else? Is this cost as cheap as we can move it and get something done, or do we have options?
There's always options. There's always options. This particular 1.4 million quote was given, I would say, maybe 18 months ago. So, of course, there was cost inflation and things of that nature. But that 1.4 million was based off of the diagram, was based off of the setup of what we wanted at that time. When I said what we wanted, everyone didn't have their eyes on it. Everyone didn't get a piece of the pie when we start to look at the development and the renovation of that site. So when we actually get into the eaches, if approved, and we need to move forward, that is when we'll really start having the cohorts to come in, everyone sit down, and let's talk through this process. Because once again, as you see just now, this is not just going to be a conversation concerning what does the band room want. It's a conversation concerning several other parts of the school, several other moving parts. So yes, we do have opportunity to do this in stages.
If you have a breakdown or a scope or anything, I'd love to see that.
I will definitely send you the scope of the existing proposed structure.
Thank you. Do we have the same option for the bus garages?
I'll tell you what,
Garage.
we can jump right to the bus garages if you like.
Yes, sir. Please
Mr.
do.
Cooper, if you can go back to slide 1. All right. And I'm going to go through the concepts and the options for the fleet service building replacement, but I do have 2 experts here, so they can easily come up to the mic to answer any questions at all. Now, just jumping right into it, the current vehicle service facility was built in 1955, similar to what we're just talking about, the 1980 structure and the 40-year difference, 45-year difference between the band room as it existed and what we're looking for. This building was built in 1955. It's inadequate for modern school bus maintenance due to space constraints, lack of climate control, and subpar safety standards. And that is one of the main drives for why we need a new facility, is the subpar safety standards. Heat and cool the structure, compromising working conditions, and this setup overall reduces efficiency. Mr. Fike, Mr. Sullivan, can you come up to the microphone, please? Now, the new proposed plan that we're looking at with fleet service building, of course, you received 3 options. Those options were a $775,000 option. That was strictly a renovation of the building, of the existing building. It was a $7.5 million structure, and that was a new building, and with all of the safety initiatives and everything that needed to occur. And then, of course, it was the $10.5 million building, and that was the joint facility with the county. So as we talked earlier, that's something that we looked into and had priced out. The county at this time chose not to actually move forward with the idea of a joint facility for all vehicles. So that's when we came back to the 7.5. At that time, we talked, and we're looking at cost savings, what we can do and what we can't do. One thing that, after talking to these 2 gentlemen that has been working in fleet services for quite a while, and one of the things that they needed, things that we really needed for the building to be efficient: an admin office, service hub, parts department, common area, 2 light fleet maintenance bays, 5 heavy fleet maintenance bays, fluid recovery, and tire inventory storage. Total square footage around about 12,500. Now, the estimated feasibility cost for this project at the time ranges between $350 and $450 a square foot. So right now, averaging it out, I did it at $425 a square foot. We're at $5,259,375, and that is the base cost, with the soft cost of being an additional $900,000. And that's for design fees, testing, inspections, different things of that nature, which brings the total up to 6.1. I should have had it on there, 6.1. Now, your question is, can we break this into phases? We can break this into phases, but what that will do is we would save money in the short term, but spend more money in the long term, because getting the individuals that actually perform the instruction, what they would do is they would come out, bill, stop, pack everything up, leave. Come back the next year, and you have to continue to pay them for their setup fees and different things of that nature. Did I miss anything? Can you talk a little bit more about the bays and different things of that nature?
Well, specifically, what kind of details would you like to know about the building that we're proposing? Because we've come up with several different options, and I know pretty much everybody out there's come out and seen us at least once or twice. So we have multiple options. There's a lot of different plans out there. It's really what the board is interested in seeing and what I can provide for you. I've got lots of blueprints.
Yeah, I've got a few questions for you myself.
Yes, sir.
I don't think there's anybody up here that is saying that a bus garage is not needed. I think we're all in agreement on that. I know, Dr. Coleman, you said for a total of 7 bays?
It will be for a total of 7 bays, 2 for the light fleet and 5 for the heavy fleet, AKA the buses.
Okay. Now, are these drive-through bays?
So in the last design that we did over the last week, we came up with a design that was absolutely bare bones. Before, when we briefed the $7.5 million, that was based on the Gloucester building. So the Gloucester building started at $6 million, and it ended up going to 7.5. So this design here is bare bones, absolutely minimal. It is going to be drive-through bays, and we can provide you with the blueprints on that. If we had to find cost savings, you could eliminate one side of the bays. You could actually split the building in half. You could push it farther down the lot, and you could minimize the amount of doors. That would be a cost savings. But at this time, almost any direction we go, if we're going to be between 7 and 8 bays, we're going to end up very close to the same price.
Right.
All right, so when you're looking at 7 bays, and I'm at a disadvantage because I haven't seen the blueprints, are you looking at a depth or width of the building deep enough where you could pull 2 full-size buses in at the same time in 1 bay?
So in the last design that we came up with, it would be 1 bay per bus. The bus would be able to drive through that bay. The bus is 45 feet long. It would be 15 feet in the front of the back of the bus, so that's enough room to move around it. But it would be single bays. It wouldn't be doubling up like that. I know what you're talking about.
Right.
In the last design, they actually have 1 bay to themselves, so it would not be a complete drive-through.
Okay. And previously, working as a mechanic myself, looking at building design, obviously you need a bay, you need the work area. Have you considered a training room?
We have, and I believe both of our designs we have training rooms attached.
Okay.
They're not big. I mean, they're really just kind of robust break rooms.
Okay.
But we do have training rooms, and it's big enough that we could also support transportation and other departments as well if they need a space to train.
All right. What about a first aid station?
We have to have one by
Okay.
OSHA regulations.
All right.
We have one now.
So currently, how many technicians do you have?
6, including myself.
All right. So it's 1 for each bay.
That's correct.
All right. Can't think of anything else right now. I would like to see these blueprints, though.
Absolutely. We'll get those for you.
Yeah, that's all I've got for right now.
Good to go.
How many bays do you have today?
Currently, we have 6 bays. We also have a wash bay that we utilize on the outside of the building. Before, that was used for washing school buses, but we've gotten to the point where we're repairing so much so fast that we've kind of taken it over a little bit, and it helps out quite a bit.
Your work is limited out there because it's outdoors.
Right.
With the new design, can we expand on that later as we grow?
That is correct. With the design, you can expand. Mr. Cooper, I just sent you another email. If you can pull the sketch up, this is a very, very raw sketch of what we will have proposed out. You see what? And what you'll see is a rough draft of what we will get the architect to actually draw out. Before we move forward with the architect, understand that the architect does cost money to actually draw it out, because once he starts to architect the design, draw the design out, what he has to do is go to MSA and other organizations to really get into the drainage, to get into the watershed, everything else, in order to get a true fee proposal for the architectural design. So we like to draw things up, talk with the architecture, and go from there until we can actually get a set thought pattern in order to move forward. So once again, this is a very rough design sketch.
Based off the plans that you have in place here, would that require a BMP pond? You educated me a bit on BMP ponds.
I am going to say there's a probably 90% chance that it will require a BMP pond.
And does your estimated cost include that BMP pond?
The estimated cost for the 7.5, the initial, I believe, did include the BMP pond. Right.
So whatever we decide, I would ask that moving forward, you keep that as a little asterisk on there. 'Cause
Absolutely.
that's an extra cost.
It
It's
is.
probably unavoidable.
It is unavoidable. Absolutely. And Ms. Perkins, when you were talking about adding areas on, it will be a tad bit hard with this particular design, but I understand what you're saying. If you look at taking off bay 6 and bay 7, you'll reduce the tire area and storage area down to bay 5. So if you came to add on, you would actually have to add on those bays, which is not impossible, but you would have to add on those bays on the other side of the storage and waste oil, but it can be done. As Mr. Sullivan stated, you can flip different things, twist different things, so that add-on can be possible. We've already talked with the architect in terms of what can happen. Yes, this building can be added on to, but we're looking at inflationary costs, different things of that nature. The same thing that we had to deal with creating vestibules over a 3-year period. We were suffering from inflationary costs every single year. So that's just some things to think about as we go through this.
And what was the cost on this as
It
opposed to
was
the
a-
original one?
It was at $425 a square foot before soft costs. It was $5,259,375. That was before soft costs.
Has anyone else noticed that everything Dr. Coleman asked for is extremely expensive?
I've got a few more questions for you now. As far as the building goes, are there any issues that you foresee connecting to, water lines, sewer lines, anything of that nature?
Almost certainly, with any building being that old, we're going to have to find a way to run septic up there. Now, whether or not we can pump to the tanks that we have just installed at the old building or not, it's hard to tell. Most likely, we would probably have to put in another septic system. And same with the well. That well that we have behind our building that's supplying both of those buildings, they're very old, so they may want to go ahead and it might be more affordable to put a new well behind that building.
Right.
That's up to the architect to figure out.
And if you can remember, for years, the county animal shelter area and the building shared a septic tank. But after construction and being outdated, we had to cut that. We had to make sure that each one of those buildings was on its separate system. So maybe once again a combined septic system if we work through the county.
Now, has any of this been included in the overall cost or considered in the cost?
Yes. Once again, the 7.5 model had everything, was all encompassing.
Okay. As far as the building design, is this a masonry constructed building or a steel building?
All steel.
Okay. I know historically steel buildings, you do get at a cheaper rate from masonry.
Right.
I'm good.
Anyone else? Let's move on then.
School buses, I think we need to go to the 5 that we agreed upon, not 6.
Could you elaborate on that? I agree, but I wish you would, for the listening audience, could you elaborate on that a bit?
Last year, we had agreed to do 5 each year. That is what the Board of Supervisors approved, and I already know we need to change that to 5.
So
Yeah.
as proposed right now, we've got 6. And so the recommendation is reduce that to 5, as per agreed last year with the Board of Supervisors.
That's correct.
Yeah, if I might add to that, that was mutually agreed upon by both boards. It was 5 per year, recurring annually for a period of 4 years.
You have anything to add, Mr. Cunningham? think everybody else seems to concur.
No, I'm good with that. Do we have this in writing from the Board of Supervisors?
No. It was a
Gentlemen's agreement?
gentleman, gentleladies agreement last year. And that was a part, I forget
I'm
how it came
pretty
to
sure
be, but
it's in minutes somewhere from
it's-
last
it's
year.
certainly
It was
documented.
So it's,
well known.
at the bottom line is it's still valid
Correct.
since, okay.
It's at least verbal agreement.
It was a verbal understanding between the two bodies. They basically said, hey, we're gonna give you guys 9.5 million for your top 5 capital improvement needs.
Mhm.
You're gonna reduce your school buses to 5, and you're gonna take it off the operational budget.
Yep.
And that's what we did.
Yeah, I was involved also, so I know about that, but again, if we don't have it in writing, we need to get it in writing. Because the Board of Supervisors, one of the board members is no longer on the board. We have a new one. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music.
So that we have it for the next 4 years
Yes.
in writing.
Yes.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
that's a recommendation from me.
I think that's a point well taken, and I would agree with you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
The weapons detection systems, do we have solid numbers on those? How many it includes? Can we break it down for the different schools?
We did. If Mr. Cooper, if you could pull that slide. Mr. Brinkley, if you can join me. The weapons detection system is broken down for 8 more units to be purchased, and the ongoing price is $19,262. 4 units being looked at is placed at the Smithfield Middle School, 4 units at Georgie Tyler Middle School at a combined of $154,000. Now, with that stated, just want to make sure that we keep in mind the additional expenses. These are some of the expenses that we did not take in consideration the first time, and that's one of the other reasons why Windsor High School rollout was so powerful. It showed us a lot of issues that we didn't take in consideration. Things of the nature of screening tables, stanchions, additional handheld detectors for secondary screening that needed to occur, sandwich board, instructional signs. Mr. Brinkley, did you have anything to add on that?
No, that was pretty much it. What we had laid out was the 4 units, which would be 2 units at the bus entrance and then 2 units at the front entrance for parent drop-off as well. So we would have 4 of those units at each of the middle schools.
Just for clarification purposes, when you're referring to units, are you talking about 2 pedestals which would form 1 unit?
Yes, the 2 pedestals form 1 unit,
Okay,
and as you pass through, they set up as 1 detector.
okay. And for clarity, how many units are we getting for the 180,000?
That'll be 8 total units.
Okay, thank you.
And along with this, with the additional costs, with the additional expenses, one thing that I did leave off is the personnel that is needed. Can you tell me a little bit more about Windsor High School, something that we found out about the personnel?
So one of the issues that we've run into at Windsor High School, obviously that being a smaller school, they don't have as many staff, and I hate to use the word expendable, but staff that are able to be used throughout the day. So one of the issues we're having is staffing that weapons detection for visitors and late arrivals coming in later on in the day. This isn't an issue that we'll have at Smithfield High School so much, because we do have some additional staff there that can take over and assume some of those roles. But at Windsor, we're really running into an issue with, if we take the SSO and leave him stationary there throughout the day to man that, then he's obviously not fulfilling all of the rest of the duties that we want him to complete. So additional staffing would definitely be beneficial for these moving forward, so that we can have someone designated to monitor these throughout the day for late arrivals, visitors coming into the schools, contractors, whatever it may be.
Mr. Brinkley, if the board is in agreement, I don't want to get too far off the SIP, but I do want to readdress the SSO position as we move forward.
Okay.
I've certainly got a few questions on that.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that? Anything And just again, for the sake of the watching, listening audience, give us a quick overview of the ADA bleachers. I know the short story is
Thank you, sir.
we're not in compliance with ADA at Smithfield High School, period.
Right. And I do not want to say that we're not in compliance. I do want to make sure that we are in compliance, but it is we're sitting very badly.
It's a piece of junk.
Yeah. Well, it needs to be replaced. I mean, there is a ramp on it. There's constant fixtures. It was made with the greatest intentions in mind, and I believe that it has lasted its life. But at this time, not only do you need the ADA bleachers, but this time when we do it, we need to go back with aluminum, and we actually need to add the sidewalks needed for the wheelchairs and for the strollers and different things of that nature. So once again, it was really done, and everyone had the best intentions in mind, and it has lasted its lifetime. But at this time, we need to be in full 100% ADA compliance with the ADA bleachers.
Dr. Coleman, did I hear you correctly? You said that it's going to be going back with aluminum structure?
We're going back with aluminum, just like the home bleachers and the away bleachers. They last a lot longer for that, and you can actually get safety inspections performed on them to certify.
Are we looking at the same size as the previous?
A little bit bigger. The one that we're looking at this time will seat close to 50 to 75 individuals, and it will have room enough for 10 to 15 wheelchairs on the front. It will be an elevated structure, so the platform will not sit ground level. It will be elevated so that there's a better line of sight for all the individuals that's at the ADA area.
One more question for you. With it being aluminum, is this anything that the CTE welding students could be involved with as part of their training as well?
Right. We looked at that a couple of years ago. The issue was the certification of the bleachers after the weld, meaning whoever comes out, whoever works on them, they will have to be certified and insured. So we did look at that, one of the options to cut costs, but unlike some other areas that we can use the CTE department for, that was one of the areas that we really strayed away from.
Okay, thank you.
What is the life expectancy of our current regular bleachers that sit next to it? Where are we at?
I
as
would
far as that
have
goes?
to, I had a report maybe 5 years ago, but I would have to actually go back and look at that report before I just give you a number, but I can send that number to you. But I do have a report.
But they're not new.
No, ma'am.
They've been
they're
around
not
for
new.
a while, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I would say that, I'll have to go back to anyone who's been here for a while. I believe those are original bleachers at the stadium when it was built.
I mean, I know Ms. Getz loves the bleachers as we have them right now, right? So my question or concern, we have bleachers that we might need to replace fairly soon, and these ADA bleachers are still separated from the main bleachers. So if we put the cost into this, then what do we do later?
Right.
Where does that leave us? So it's something to consider and see which direction we want to take.
Okay. And one thing I can do before the next session is actually research replacement of all bleachers on the home side. I will have the inspection report for all the board members in the community so they can see the same thing that we're seeing, but I can get a quote on the replacement of all bleachers.
Yeah, it's not that we don't want to provide something better. I think all of us are in agreement, but I also don't want to waste money and not do it right when we have better
Absolutely.
options that we have to look
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Perhaps it's worth at least, I agree, 150%. To your point, maybe we can also look at, instead of rebuilding right where the current bleachers are, maybe choking up and getting close to the existing bleachers. So when we do replace those bleachers, we can tie into them. I don't know.
Okay.
I would imagine a lot of that stuff's modular these days anyways.
It should be. It should be. If it's not seaming it down and different things of that nature, yeah.
Worth looking into maybe. What else we got, people?
Well, it looks like Dr. Coleman's going to owe us some information back. So I'll go ahead and withdraw the motion that we vote on this, on sending this up to the Board of Supervisors. And we just hold off and wait for the information Dr. Coleman's going to provide at a later date.
I think that'd be appropriate,
Yeah.
especially given since we've got the hearing next week, so that we might get some direct feedback from the community as well.
Yep. Thank
Absolutely.
you, Dr. Coleman.
No problem.
All right. What do y'all want to delve into next?
Mr. Chair, if we can, I would actually, I'm at a little disadvantage because I wasn't here at the last meeting. But I would like to go to the 4-page major changes general fund.
Okay. Yep, he's got it up on the screen.
Okay, I actually do have several questions on this one. My first question is probably going to be for you, Ms. Getz. Dealing with the tuition I'll grow for $40,000, can I get a thorough explanation on what exactly that is, what it's for, and what funding source is it coming from?
So if you remember back, it's been a minute, when Ms. Magner, she presented on I'll Grow. And it is a preschool program that is for special education and peer models. So it's got regular general ed students who are models along with our pre-K special education students. We have programs at Carrollton, Windsor, and Hardy. The kids who are the peer models, they pay to come. So we are collecting the revenue for the cost of their programs. The special education students they do not pay tuition.
Would you happen to know the percentage? I know it's hard to predict it, but the ones that would be paying out of that, with that 40,000, how would it offset the 40,000?
It's actually a total of 90,000 that we receive in. This is an increase because in the previous 2 years, it's only been budgeted at 50,000. So this is an increase of 40,000 to the revenue side.
Okay, and this funding is coming from where?
The child's family or.
Okay. What about local funds contributing to that?
Let me go back. We charge for the peer models, the parents pay $5,500 for daycare, childcare, preschool. For the special education students, we provide that because we would be serving those students anyways. We are just serving them in this setting with peer models. So it's not that we were always serving the special needs children. We've added the peer model part.
I guess let me just rephrase that. As far as that 40,000, is there any portion of that that's coming from state grants, federal grants,
No.
state funding? It's all local.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
It's tuition. That
Okay.
is tuition from parents. Yeah, it's not county money.
All right.
I think he might be confused with the all-in preschool stuff and the difference. The SPED stuff we have for requirements are with the Algrow. We have requirements as far as SPED and keeping that, correct?
Yes, I mean, these special education students are our students, and we must provide programming for them.
And the all-in, is that a different program, a different something
Totally,
else?
yep, yes, ma'am. All in is totally separate. That was the money that was given to us to cover Virginia Literacy Act. So it's Virginia Literacy Act, it's tutoring, and it was attendance. So that's grant money. It will end next year, and there will be no additional money for all in.
If I may add, Vice Chair Wooster, the section that we're looking at is changes in revenue. So those are additional revenue sources.
But what I'm trying to determine is where exactly that 40,000 comes from.
The parents.
The
Additional
40,000
revenue.
in that line is tuition from parents.
Okay, thank you. That's all I needed.
Okay.
Do you mind if I jump in right quick?
Go ahead.
So we're looking at page 2. That's where we're moving to, yeah? So Dr. Kramer, if you would, I'd like to talk about the new positions. Short story is you've requested 15 new positions across the division. Reading interventionist, math interventionist, IA, so on and so forth. 15 people. We spoke Monday briefly, and I made mention and asked you to explain how it is that our average daily membership is expected to decline, yet we're adding additional revenues and positions. And I thought your answer was well articulated. There is no one single answer. There's a lot of contributing factors. I also know that when we started the school year, and I'll pick on Mrs. Sullivan a little bit, we were, if memory serves, 7, maybe 9 positions we started unfilled. And due to the creativity and ingenuity of you folks up here, you merged a couple of classes, combined 2 classes into one using 1 teacher, so on and so forth. There's several different things that you had to do to make it happen so that when we started the school year, we were ready. So my question really is, so far this year, how many positions have remained unfilled? And have we been able to utilize those funds for unfilled positions to hire alternative positions? And I guess that's my winded way of asking, are there options on the table to use the funding we have without creating new positions? And I'll kind of leave it at that for you to respond, Dr. Kramer.
Sure, I can go. Do you want to go ahead and respond? Okay.
Yes, please.
So I can go ahead and respond to that. And we have done that this year. And I think you guys will most recently, I believe in the month of November, December, we had a need for an additional registered behavior technician. And so we came to you all and said, we have a teacher special education vacancy that we cannot fill. And so however, we have this need to support the behavioral needs of our non-SPED students and then sometimes to that transition of SPED. And so you all approved to reallocate the funding from that special education position to cover an RBT position. However, knowing that at the end of this year that we still need that special education position, because even though we have not been able to fill it, we've had to hire a substitute to be able to fill that role. We've had to expand the caseloads of our current special education staff members to take on those students. And so we have found fixes when we can't hire, but those do sometimes also cost funds, sometimes a little bit less than a full-time teacher. So we were able to use that allocation to cover that RBT for this year, knowing that it was going to be reverted back to that special education position next year. So that is something that we're able to do, I think, within a given budget year. We request what we know that we need based on our student numbers, our needs, and our enrollments, and our special education needs. And then if we are unable to hire them, that's where we can start to look at creative options. Like, we can't find a teacher, but we have this person who's an RBT, and they can support our current teachers by taking that weight off of them of carrying the load of those extra special education teachers, because now they have someone to support them with the behavioral needs of those students. And so we are able to do that. However, we do, position control is something that we analyze on a regular basis. I can say that it has been extremely helpful having Mrs. DeVary here to help with that process. It was hard having turnover in the finance department to keep that under control. However, it is something that in human resources we review that on a monthly basis when we're doing our hiring and our personnel reports. And so we're able to do that, but we do always have to revert back to what are those basic needs, and then what does our position control look like? I know someone had spoke at the last meeting about looking at a zero-based budget, like looking at first grade and saying, this is how many kids we have in first grade, how many teachers do we need? We do that as part of our budget process. So each year we might say, well, we have 22 first grade teachers this year. Let's look at the rising numbers. So those kindergartners who we already know who are coming up, how are they going to fall in first grade? And then what is the max number we can carry in that first grade class? And so Ms. Getz and I work together to kind of look at the staffing numbers. We also look to see, we're starting to inform principals. You need to roll a first grade teacher that you have this year up to your second grade because you don't need them coming in with the kindergarten class, but your first grade class is going to stay big in second. They need to move up. And so we are facilitating those changes. We don't just add a staff member because they're not going in that direction. So we do analyze those on an annual basis and then also monthly to see what kind of creative things we can do to support with the vacancies that we have.
All makes perfect sense. In my mind, that's a moving target.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. There was one thing you said early on, is that you, for the particular position you mentioned, the RBT, you may have had to hire a substitute. So that makes sense. So you can't tit for tat with a situation like that. If you have to hire a substitute to fill a position that's not filled, it's a zero gain. It's probably a loss, if anything, because subs cost more, I think. But I'll go back to my original question. Are there, and I don't need an answer right now, I would ask that you go back and take a hard look. Are there positions today that are unfilled that you were able to find an alternative, a trick, if you would, so that we could possibly, what was the phrase you said?
Like reallocate them?
Position control is a term you used. I wouldn't suggest that you would do away with any position. Perhaps just allocate $0 for that position and bring in one of your needs with those funds. I don't know. You all have to work the books. What I do know is that we have a lot of asks again this year, and I don't expect we're going to get all the funding that we want. So we're going to have to cut somewhere. So I'd ask that we take a good hard look and see what options we are. And I understand and appreciate the fact that you've already done that with your budgeting process. Does that make sense?
It does, Mr. Chair, and certainly staff and I have already actually taken a look at our budget from the initial budget we shared with you all in our one-on-one meetings and our 2-2-1s. So we've already made some cuts. We're looking at the budget to see where we could, to your point, making some really tough decisions because, again, as I stated on Monday, I think this is a pretty fair, somewhat frugal attempt that we've made to be reasonable and to be as practical as possible, yet trying to meet the essential needs of our school division. But we certainly will take a look at other spaces where, well, I think to your larger point, you're asking about positions, but I think as you and perhaps Mrs. Perkins and others have stated, we may have to make additional cuts, and we're well aware of that. So staff and I will certainly have that larger conversation and see where we might be able to make some additional cuts, whether positions or otherwise.
Thank you. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I struggle with the board identifying specific positions to cut. You folks know better than we, in my opinion, which ones you really need the most. And I suspect going forward, and I know we're getting ready to get into some specific questions, so I'm going to shut up soon, but assuming that we don't get all the funding that we asked for, it would be my preference that you prioritize those positions over me.
I would greatly appreciate that deference, Mr. Chair, and we'll have that conversation with staff so that we can respond. But I appreciate that. If there are further cuts that need to be made, I would rather have that conversation with our team to see what we would propose.
Thank you. And on that, I'm going to shut my mouth, and I know there's plenty of questions about these positions on page 2.
Mr. Chair, may I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
So the budget that you have before you has been significantly, and when I say significantly, I mean significantly reduced compared to what our principals have asked for.
Oh, I get it. Listen,
compared-
I do. You don't have to sell me on that. If I had a pocket full of money, I'd give you every one of them.
I understand.
But again, this is just my personal view. I'm trying to look at this down the long road. Last year, we asked the county to give us $9.5 million, and they blessed us with that. This year, we're going to ask for another multi-million-dollar capital funds request. That's a lot for the county taxpayers to put on their shoulders. It's got to come from somewhere. And I'd rather be prepared to be told no than just present something and not be prepared for it. So that's my ask. If the answer that you come back with after talking about this is, look, we've got to have these are required, and we're going to be in a bad spot without these positions, then I think the board deserves to hear that straight shot. But if there's some options on the table to repurpose some positions for funding, then I think we need to look at that. And that's just my opinion. Trust me when I tell you that I hear you. I know that you've made some cuts, and they're hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Going on that line of thought, we asked Ms. Magner about SPED teachers. Are you prepared tonight to show us things?
Specifically, did you want to look at the ratios? Is that what you were?
Well, what we have are the SOQ guidelines, and what we have is a large variance as in the SPED department of what the state is saying we need for SOQ funding and what we have. So I think the public needs to understand the justification for these positions, especially when we have another position, well, 3 positions.
And I think
on
I just
the
want to
budget.
be clear. SOQs are not what the state says we should have. It says what we are required to have. We can have no less than that and accept the basic aid funding. They also recognize specifically for SPED that we receive quite a bit of federal funding, and so they expect the gap to be big in special education, what they're requiring from a state level, because they know that we have federal funding from special education. So we don't get federal funding for any of our general education teachers from the federal government. That's all funded through the state and local. And so the part of the reason why you see the disparity in SPED and SOQs is going to because they know that we're reliant on the federal funding for that. And again, it's not what we should have, it is what we are required to have. And they recognize it does not meet the needs, the numbers of students that we have. The SOQ funding is not accurate, and they have written several reports that it is not a good funding model.
So for clarification, the SOQ, is that just saying what the state thinks we should have?
No, it is saying what they are willing to fund. Okay. They have said that they are willing to fund this because they have this model that is outdated and not accurate, and so they assign an arbitrary number and say, we're going to give you this much money for this particular thing. And because we're giving you this much money, you are required to have at least 10 SPED teachers, which they recognize is not what we need.
Trish, can you elaborate on what the federal government, whatever guidelines, regulations we are doing, and any details any of you might have on the funding, any match requirements from local, any relevant information?
I will try to answer the questions you guys have as best I can. I'm not that tall. Okay, is that better? Whew. Okay. I did print for you guys. Oh my gosh. That's not, sorry. I did print for you guys what is in the regulations. So again, separate from the SOQs, this is actually the regulation that we are bound to. So this is my compliance piece. And the chart you guys have in front of you hopefully will help to show why we need so many teachers for the number of students that we have. So just as an example, on the page that I provided, that top chart, you can see where it's broken down by disability category on the left-hand side, and also by what's called level 2 or level 1 services. So imagine level 2 services being my self-contained classrooms or special populations or programs. If a student has autism, as you can see in that first row, that teacher can only have 8 students in her class if that population requires a self-contained setting. And that's with a paraprofessional. If that class does not have a paraprofessional or instructional assistant, they can only have 6. So the number of students that we have that require that level of need absolutely dictates the number of teachers that we have, regardless of what SOQ says.
Get it. I'm a simple guy. Paraprofessional means what?
Instructional assistant.
Okay.
We call them IAs here, but in the regs you can see they're called paraprofessionals.
You gotta talk plain to me.
I'm sorry. So similarly, if you look at developmental delay age 2-5, that's going to be our preschool population, which is also another significant population for us. And you can see with our paraprofessionals in place, again, we can only have 8 students in that classroom. So this is actually what we review and what we base our decisions on, is so that we can remain in compliance. On the same chart, to the right-hand side where it says level 1, those are the students who would require no pull-out whatsoever. So all of their services would be in the general education setting. But if you go down to the bottom chart, if you start to combine students who require push-in services in the general ed setting and pull-out, so both level 1 and level 2, the number reduces significantly in terms of how many students can be on a teacher's caseload.
And just because I'm going to interject.
Yeah.
We've said numerous times that although our ADM, overall student population, does tend to decline, our SPED population has increased how many %? Put you on spot. You told me last week.
Overall, let me go back because I have my summary.
It was significant. It was 20-some odd % over the past so many years.
It's been 24% over the past like 6 to 8 years, I believe since 2016.
Sorry to interject.
You're fine. The 3 teachers that we're asking for are a direct result of our kindergarten population that's rising from preschool. So the preschool population that's rolling up into kindergarten next year is, we have 21 students rolling up currently that we know of from our preschool classrooms. Of those 21 students, 15 already will require a self-contained setting. If you go back to the chart I provided, 15 students requires at the 3 teachers that we're asking for because of the need for growth in those classrooms. Again, these are the kids that we have and we know of today. It's not going to include all of the transfers that we get from early intervention over the summer.
I know one of the challenges you're running into are the specific needs of the children to the different schools. Where are we as far as what we have now? Are we where we should be to be compliant? Do we have more than we need for compliance?
More teachers?
Where are we at with what the government says we need? And I know that isn't necessarily what you say we need based on the specific needs of the children and where they are in the school system. So I understand that differs.
Yeah, we're within compliance. We try to maintain that. Every quarter, we take a look at the number of students we have in each building, both in self-contained settings and in the inclusion setting. And we do monitor to make sure that we are remaining within compliance based on the regs as I showed in that chart. All of our positions, however, haven't been filled. Although we still need them to maintain compliance, we will continue to try to fill them. In fact, we had interviews today, for example, to try to fill those positions so that we can remain in compliance. But we do remain in compliance. I don't want to, we are asking for what we need. We are mindful of our numbers, and we really are not trying to ask for more than what we need, but we do have to ask for what we know we have with the idea that it potentially will and continue to grow. We never know who's going to show up tomorrow, which is why we do routinely, like quarterly, review our numbers to make sure that we are okay where we are and we know what we need for next year.
And to be clear, I have seen you work magic with the budget you were given. It's pretty impressive, actually. So you have positions that have been unfilled, but you're asking for 3 more positions on top of those positions.
Correct. I need to fill those positions still to be in compliance. So I can't use those current positions to fill the need for these 3 new classrooms I have to create for the kindergarten students rolling up.
How many of these new positions are to meet requirements?
All 3.
So if we do not fill these positions, we are not going to be compliant.
Correct.
And that is based on current numbers, not on expectations.
Numbers today. Yep. With the roll-up for next year, yes.
And is this going to be funded by federal money, or is this all going to be local?
It's local. These positions are not in my grant.
So the federal government is requiring it, but they are not paying for it?
Yes.
It's not really probably not a fair question, but I'm going to ask you anyways.
Sure.
If you didn't fill those 3 positions this year, what makes you think you're going to fill 6 next year? It's pretty rhetorical. I mean,
I'll be honest. We interviewed today with the hopes of filling for tomorrow. So we're still working to fill the vacancies we have this year. If I didn't fill all my vacancies, the teachers have a higher caseload right now because of those vacancies. So I absolutely need to fill those vacancies, and we continue to work daily to do so.
Understood.
Just out of curiosity, what do you attribute the inability to fill these positions to? Are people just not applying or not interested? What do you think the reason is?
We lost someone recently to another school division because of pay. So that's a contributing factor. It's also a tough job. It's a hard job.
Just like with all of our teaching positions, there is a nationwide shortage of people going into the teaching profession. One school division in the state of Virginia hires all of the brand new teachers coming out of every single college prep program in the state of Virginia, in Northern Virginia. Fairfax can take every single one of them each year that they're produced. We are, as you can see in the comparison chart that I sent you a couple of days ago, we are ranked 10th through 12th in teacher pay in Region 2. I know, Mr. Collick, you had said last time you wanted to do better than just kind of staying on par. In order to do that, instead of having a 3% increase for our teachers this year, we need 11% increase. And that's just for us to get into 4, 5, and 6 when it comes to our teacher pay. More often than not, when teachers turn down a job from us, it's because of the pay. They can make $5,000 more to go to Chesapeake. $10,000 more to go to Chesapeake City Schools, and for many of them, they live halfway between here and Chesapeake, and so that is a huge issue for us.
Yeah, I was at a job fair at William & Mary the other day, and they have a small cohort for special education, and all 5 girls came up at one time, and that's where I have my degrees from. And I was like, hey, I did what you guys are doing, and they all said to me that they weren't interested in our division because of the pay. And in fact, one of the girls actually graduated from Smithfield High School, and I couldn't even lure her back. And they were then interviewing with the Northern Virginia schools and even some of the area schools that are closer to the beach. So yeah, it's hard to draw.
So hypothetically speaking, let's just say you still cannot fill these positions.
Yeah.
What are the consequences for us as the school if you cannot fill those positions?
Well, we try to fill them with substitutes so that there is someone to work with the students. I mean, that's absolutely the #1 goal, is I want to make sure that we have teachers there to work with kids. Our SPED teachers do take on larger caseloads if we can't fill positions. The goal is never to be out of compliance and to make sure that we provide services continually, no matter what. So we do draw from other staff when we need to fill holes. We're doing it this week with some, it's unfortunately the life we live. is just trying to make sure we can keep the people we have so that our services remain consistent for the kids.
And
Thank
I
you.
think to kind of like also to piggyback off of that as well, what happens when we can't fill those is that we have burnout of our current staff. We're overloading them, and so not spending the money up front and increasing teacher pay and then supporting the positions like the additional staff, just leads to additional burnout of those individuals that are already like working for us and committed to the students here. So that's definitely something that we need to consider is, like with the RBT, considering not having that additional position there, that's one more thing that's going to, make them choose a different location. In comparison, we were just speaking about like the teacher pay. 10 years ago, we were in the top 5 across all the pace, like the different pay rates in terms of like your 5th year, 10th year, and we have slowly not met that mark year after year. And we're not keeping up, and we're going to drastically need to look out how we can overcome that. Doing the 3% is exactly what everyone else in our region is doing, so all we're doing is meeting the status quo with that.
And in some cases, we're not.
Correct.
A few years ago, one division gave 10%. So we are not keeping up in many cases.
Yeah.
Just to be the devil's advocate, since we're talking about pay, the conversation is inevitable. We were provided with a chart for Superintendent's Region 2 for teachers with a bachelor's degree. We cherry-picked quite a few teachers from Suffolk this last year, yeah?
I'd have to go back and look at our where they specifically came from. We have a couple each year, yes.
Yeah, it was more than a handful, because I remember at the convocation, there was quite a crowd of teachers that had come from Suffolk. And what's interesting, and I'll preface this by saying I agree, we need to bump up the pay. But according to this pay chart, every rank of teacher with a bachelor's degree, from no experience all the way up to 30-year experience, Suffolk, which is just down the road, pays about $5,000 more a year. So the fact that we're pulling teachers in from Suffolk at a $5,000 approximate pay cut speaks volumes. I think the answer to that mostly is obvious, why they're doing it. But what about compensation? I mean, we're going to go down several little rabbit holes with this budget discussion. Has anyone looked at the compensation packages aside from the paycheck of other school divisions?
Yes. I mean, speaking of Suffolk, I don't want to promote another school division right now, but Suffolk's compensation package is better. I believe with their HSA plan, their employees pay, if it's an employee only, I don't believe they have to pay any premium for their health insurance when it's employee only. So I know that one's for Suffolk. I haven't looked comparatively at a lot of the other school divisions with our health insurance. But that is something for us to consider. I do get a lot when I call and offer a job and they ask me about the health insurance and the premium rates. I do get a lot of, oh, wow, that's more than I'm paying right now. But I don't have like the firm data. That's just anecdotal information from that they've shared with me.
That's fine. It's be a variable answer either way.
Yeah.
Going back, is it possible to put these positions that are required in there with a zero budget unless we know they're going to be filled and go ask for that money at that time instead of asking for it in a budget that it might not even get used? If that
The
makes
problem
sense.
is if we wait to see, we will never find the people. Like if you want to hire, we have to start right now, and we've got to do a lot of work to get them hired. If we wait until September, and we know because we've been in this every single year, we will never find those people.
Well, the problem is we have 6 positions, 3 of which we have been unable to fill at this time. So that's a lot of money floating around when we already have a tight budget. So if we were able to say, we don't need this right now, but we might come to you in a few months and say, okay, we need it now. I'm just asking, is this even an option? I don't know.
Not for the special education, because we already know based on what we have, what we are going to need, and it's the vacancies plus those 3. So, no.
Well, based on the need, but fiscally speaking, are we able to do that?
Like you're asking,
Is it a
could
possibility
could we
in the
post
budget-wise?
You're asking, like, could we post a job, potentially interview, and then go to the Board of Supervisors and say, we actually found someone for this position that we need. Can we now have the money for that?
Is it even an option? I'm just trying to find solutions for a tight budget.
I mean, in that
So I'm
regard,
looking
they would
everywhere.
the county would still need to budget for that if they were expected to have us ask for it. And I think the difference is the money sitting in our budget already, which of course we return at the end of the year if we don't utilize those funds, or it's sitting in their budget waiting, and hopefully we ask for it first, I guess, if that's the case. I don't know that process would really be.
Yeah.
I really don't think we can do that. I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but it's somewhat unethical. I mean, I'm just saying, if we don't have the money, we can't.
Well, the county would have the money still somewhere. It just wouldn't be sitting in our budget.
We don't have the money. That's the problem. Yeah. If we don't have the money, we can't interview for something that we don't have. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. The other thing to keep in mind is, the county sets its tax rate on real estate based on the expected expenses. So if we don't budget for it, they don't budget for it, by setting the tax rate, then where would the money come from later?
So that is different than what we're doing with these other positions. Y'all were talking about zeroing out other positions somehow and filling them. So I didn't know if it was different than what we were doing before. So.
Do you mean when we talked about how we look at each grade level throughout the division, all the schools, and we reallocate where we need to?
The positions we've been unable to fill, and
like reallocating them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so reallocating is where we have the money already in our budget, and then we would say, we're going to move this money over to pay for this position instead of this position we initially had, that you all approve when you approve either a new position or someone to go into an increased FTE or that sort of thing.
All right. I appreciate it. This is just a new territory, so I'm just trying to see what our options are, see if we have any.
I think what Mrs. DeVere was saying is that the county, just like we have to budget 12 months out. They don't really have, they have a contingency fund, but it's not dedicated for positions and stuff like that. So they're literally budgeting 12 months out just like we are. And I think their contingency is designated for an array of items that are unexpected, but certainly would be out of the norm for that contingency to be based on possible fills. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What do you have, John?
So what I'm hearing is we've got a number of positions that haven't been filled. We've got a number of positions that we need to stay in compliance. Also, we've got very limited funds that we can expect from the Board of Supervisors. So we've got to, in my mind, we've got to look in two places for the money. Okay, we've got to look first to the Board of Supervisors. We need some money from them. But we've also got to look internally to find out, okay, what do we have that is nice to have that we absolutely don't need? We can use it, but it's not 100% required. And I think we need to dive in there a little bit to get some of the money for some of these positions. Like Mrs. Sullivan said, I want to make sure we're paying all of our employees properly. If we can't pay them properly, I don't want to bring them on. I want to take care of those folks that we have right now and then hopefully bring on more. But we do have to stay in compliance. you know, and I understand the special needs world probably a little bit better than some. Obviously not any better than, you know, the folks sitting in front of me. But we need those professionals in those positions before the kids show up. So we're going to need your help identifying, okay, where can we get more funds out of things that we have traditionally had? And then how much money do we absolutely have to go to the supervisors and ask for? Okay, so they go hand in hand, and we need your help with that. Okay, thank you.
Seems like a good time to transition into pay raises. Anybody?
I'll take it. Looking over the pay, change in pay, I'm going through it, looking at the different lines. Don't have any issues with the line. I've got one question on this. Dealing with the last line on nurses and clinic assistant. I'm showing an overall total of $17,861. How is that broken down?
This is, you know, we have included a 3% across the board pay increase for everyone, including all of the nurses, clinic assistants. And then for this area, we then added on another 2%. So this is the additional 2%.
Okay, so when I'm looking at the 17,861, how does that break down? What percentage of increase or what dollar amount would that be per nursing staff?
It's 2%, an additional 2% of their current pay. After they received the 3% increase, then we also increased them another 2%. So each person is at a different pay, you know, based on.
Okay. What I've been looking at, just like with the SPED students, in Wight County, we're seeing an increase in the number of students which have special medical needs, such as, I'm just throwing things out, feeding tubes, insulin pumps, special medication requirements. I've had people contact me, parents from the community, referring to their children and, you know, the special medical needs that they have as well, which I will not get into that right now. So I went back and I was looking through the current salaries. And I did have Ms. Whitlow forward this to Dr. Kramer, all board members. I don't see Mr. Christensen, but he got it as well. I went back through and I was looking at average salaries in Virginia, and I was looking at the current salaries that we're paying. With the increase in the number of students with special medical needs, and the fact that we're going to have to compete with the new Riverside that is being built, they are going to be hiring nurses. They are going to be hiring other assistive staff, such as paramedics, EMTs. You've got to look at Riverside Convalescent, which is right up the road. All of those places or positions will pay more than what we're currently paying right now. Now, I'm not saying that we need to have critical care nurses in the schools, but what we do need to do is provide a competitive salary. So what I did is I researched Virginia average salaries, and each number listed in there from low to high is from the 25th to 75th percentile. And just doing a comparison, it is, we are not even close to meeting that benchmark. So I went through everything, and I have a proposal as far as, since we're into budgeting, I have a proposal to add this to the budget. Now, if you look at my numbers may be off on licensure levels, but the percentages are accurate. Based on a 10% increase, if you look at a nursing supervisor position, the average Virginia salary is $78,000 to $148,000. Currently, that position is paying $68,000, so we're below the average. With a 10% increase, you're bringing that to a $75,117.80. If you look at the RN, BSN, I did lump that into one category because by the school's pay scale, they are lumped in as the same. They are currently at $47,277, and the state average is $40,000 to $60,000. So with a 10% increase on that, it comes out to $52,004.70. And I continued on with LPNs, clinic assistants. What I would like to see personally for each school is to have a nurse and a clinic assistant at each school. So you've got 2 people. So in this proposal, I'm looking at changing I believe it's 2 part-time to full-time with benefits, and add 1 more clinic assistant to equal it out to where you do have 2 persons in each clinic. Now, these numbers that I've based it on, this is strictly salary. I have not included benefits. That's you. I don't have the ability to calculate that. So what I'm looking at for an overall increase for all personnel involved with a 10%, it comes out to $71,655. I think that is a very fair amount to recruit and retain quality nurses to provide specific medical care for the students in the county, especially since the medical needs are increasing. So I would like to go ahead and include this as a proposal for the budget. In addition to that, I want to see substitutes, LPN, BSN, RN, their hourly rate increased to that of a regular employee, but they would have no benefits associated with that. Do you have a copy of that?
We did. Yes.
Okay.
And is this just changing the starting pays? That's what I think you have here?
This would be, in my opinion, a base pay.
Right, so you're just looking to change the base pays.
Correct.
From my own understanding, Mr. Wooster, you're requesting not only to restructure our current manning, I guess is what you would call it, your number of positions per each school.
Correct.
But you're also proposing to give our existing nurses and assistants a 10% raise.
That is correct, to bring it up to the current state averages.
So, listen, I don't disagree that it's probably well-deserved, but I would also say that there's plenty of other positions, as we've already discussed, that we could arguably justify a 10% raise for them as well. In fact, I think Mrs. Sullivan said that 11% was the magic number to get everybody up to par. I'm not sure how you would explain to any of the other employees of Wight County Schools how one group gets a 10% pay raise while the other group did not.
One thing I would like to add to that, based on your comment, is the school nurses, they are not included in the SOQ. However, it is my understanding that they have also been compensated the 3% whenever the increase came out.
Yes, so when we've given a 3% raise, we've given it to all employees. SOQ, nurses are not required by SOQs. We don't have to staff. any nurses in our building. The regulations say that they may strive to staff 1 per 1,000 students. So in our division, that would be 5.5. However, we recognize the importance and the value of having a qualified nurse in every single school that we have. So that is the reason why we staff it, and they've received all of the same percent increases as all of our other employees have.
I'm just going to give you my own personal opinion on this. Take it for what it's worth. I think if you are staffing less than 2 people per nursing station, it is subpar.
Based off what?
Based off standards and workloads.
What standards?
One incident can tie up the nurse completely. So what happens at that point?
I don't disagree with that, and I'm certainly not a medical professional, but I'm confident that our current positions meet requirements. And so my question is, if it's subpar, in accordance with what? There's got to be some sort of a requirement other than just a subjective opinion.
It's a simple thing of providing a better coverage and a responsibility to the students that we serve. The last thing I want to see is not being able to properly provide medical care to a student that's in need and have a very poor outcome.
I don't think any of us want that.
I do want to clarify a couple of things, having looked at the proposal. Our nurses are not paid at the base rate, so the base rate is what's listed on our pay scale, but they are compensated for experience. So the numbers that have been worked up here would not equate to the end result, even with benefits, because many of them have several years of experience and are paid for that experience on top of what the base rate is. And we do actually give a supplement of $1,500 if you have your BSN. So all of our teachers are required to have their bachelor's degree. That is the base minimum. Our nurses are not required to have a bachelor's degree, so we do give an advanced degree supplement to our nurses of $1,500. In addition to that, if they have their master's degree, they get another $1,500, and in addition to that, if they're nationally board certified, they get another $1,500 added on top of that to try to recruit more qualified nurses. And because they're on the admin pay scale, they get the same amount of money per year of experience than all of the administrators in the district do as well. And so that's how their experience is compensated for that. Personally, I definitely don't disagree that our nurses deserve that same 10% increase. But I would say that in looking at the comparison within our region, like I spoke to with you about with the 10, 11, and 12 and the pay scale for teachers, our nurses are currently sitting 4th in that comparison. And so I don't think any of the nurses in our region are getting paid enough. But when you're looking at across the board in a comparison, they are sitting at a higher rank than our teachers are in comparison to people in equal staffing options that they're currently in.
I would argue the fact with you on that one that it's probably more difficult to find quality nurses that are willing to work in the school system than it is to find teachers in various areas.
I think we have a huge shortage both in the medical field and in the teaching field at this point.
I do not dispute that whatsoever. And again, just like teachers, there are other options. You were referencing Suffolk earlier. We've got other areas where if you've got nurses that live within the county, they can probably go elsewhere and make a lot more money. So my goal is to get it in that average.
Yes, we would agree. We would like to get all of them there.
that $1,500 you mentioned for BSN, is that a one-time payment or does that go into the base pay?
It's into their pay. It gets calculated in equal installments.
So it's an overall $1,500 increase in the salary.
Mm-hmm, just like any other advanced degree supplement, every single year that is added on to their pay into their contract and divided over the equal installments of that.
So let me ask you this, looking at the numbers that I have, are any of the nurses or clinic assistants anywhere near what I have listed?
That would be I couldn't really answer that just because I don't know what you mean by near. All of our nurses have experience.
No, I'm talking about pay scale.
Yes, so all of our nurses have experience. So at this time, we don't have anyone who is receiving a base pay as a nurse.
Okay, I'm talking about the current salaries that they are currently making. Is it anywhere near what I have listed?
They are making more than the 47,277.
Okay, that's what's listed as the base pay, which I took off
Yep.
the online.
Yep.
And my change to that would be bringing it to 52,000. Are they anywhere near that number?
Some of them are making more than that, yes,
Okay,
based on their years of experience in the field.
okay. I'm still sticking with this, that I want this submitted for consideration in the budget as well.
I can provide you exact numbers, you know.
That would be great.
No names, just number
Nope,
of
don't need names.
positions and, or this is their current rate of pay.
Yep, don't need
And
names,
the
just
supplements.
title.
But in order to,
RN, BSN,
Just-
LPN.
Right, just those
and
positions.
to
what
include
the
this in the budget, we would need to go back and rework the numbers and come back to you to say the actual total is going to be
Correct.
this, because the 10% is
Correct.
going to look a lot different on their current salaries versus what this is. Okay.
Correct.
And I believe these Virginia average salaries that you have listed here, that's for a 12-month position, whereas ours are 10-month.
It wasn't based on any time frame. These are just general averages from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile.
But it would be for 12 months of work, and ours only work 10 months out of the year. So that's why it's not equivalent pay to say, you know, that a school nurse is anywhere from 40 to 60,992. That's for 12 months of work.
I'm looking at the averages, and this would be based on, what is it, 200 or 220 days or something like that?
Additionally, just so we make sure we gather everything for the proposal, this also would be adding, I believe, 3 positions. So 3 clinic assistants is what you want to add.
It would change 2 from part-time to full-time.
We don't have any part-time, so we have a substitute.
I'm sorry, substitute.
Mhm.
My mistake, I take that back. From substitute to full-time.
So that means we would deplete our substitute fund, like we would take the funds out of the substitute fund, because those 2 positions are not currently budgeted for as payroll, as a position. We have a pot of money that we have as a substitute fund, and so in order to create these as 3 new positions, we would need to keep some money in the substitute fund to make up for when they're not there, but also then create 2 positions, or 3, because there's a 3rd one as well.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just making sure that's what you're asking for. So 3 new clinic assistant positions for us to work up the numbers of what that would do to affect the budget.
Looking at the budget as a whole, and I'm speaking solely for myself, with any budget, you've got definite needs, you've got wants, and you've got wishes. And looking at the total budget, I'm of a firm belief that somewhere, somehow, we're going to have to trim about $3 million off of it. That's the way I'm looking at it. I don't know how, I don't know where. But some of that could be repurposed for specifically this. So, and that, we're just going to have to figure this out as we go.
I think we're in a little bit of gray territory, at least it is gray for me, but I think what you're asking is for the staff to change the proposed budget. Would the board agree that that's an action item?
Yeah, that would be an action item, and I don't think we're ready for that yet.
Okay.
No, I didn't intend for it to be an action item tonight.
Okay.
So I apologize if it was taken that way.
Question, the step increase from last year, were the nurses included in that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Or the percent increase that we gave, the 3%.
Not just the 3%. Didn't we do a step increase as well?
Only for those on the teaching pay scale, so none of your administrative pay scales got step increases. None of your support staff employees got step increases, because there is no step scaled. Like, there is no increment. If you look at our pay scales, there's a base rate, and then they are given years of experience. So on years where you give a step increase, instructional staff members and the clinicians are the only ones who get the step and the percentage.
Okay, I thought they were included in that.
We did not compensate for our years last year in like the admin pay scale.
Okay, thank you.
So just so I can go on record, I do not expect it to be an action item tonight. I do expect it to be an action item prior to finalizing the budget.
So for
That's
the
all
sake
I've
of
got.
time, we'll summarize it by saying that the budget proposed by the superintendent includes a 3% pay raise for Wight County employees across the board. And the existing proposal includes an additional 2% for our nursing staff, so that the nurses would get 5%. Mr. Wooster's proposal would include a 10% on top of the 3% for the nurses. Is that what you're telling us?
That would be a negative. That would be 10% period, not on top of any other percentage.
Total 10%?
Total of 10.
Okay. All right, moving right along. We can.
Do you want me to provide what the estimate would be? How it would change this budget that we have proposed if we would change, remove that 2% and only give them, or not only, but give them a 10% increase?
If you could do that, that would be great. I would love to see it.
If I can suggest, it sounds like there's some disparities between what's presented and what the staff's actually getting paid to include their additional stipends based off certifications. I think it would be well worth our time to look at how that really measures out so that we get an accurate depiction of the proposal. I struggle with the notion of giving, and again, I listen, the nurses, they need to be paid. My wife's a nurse. I get it. Nurses work their tails off. But I struggle with the notion of singling out one group to get a 10% raise, whereas everyone else gets 3%. I'm having a hard time with that. I think it's important to, if we're going to consider giving pay raises to everyone, we need to look at the entire division equally, rather than singling out any particular group. We were talking earlier about SPED positions and SPED teachers and how hard it is to hire them, and we could certainly argue that all of our SPED teachers need 10%. We could pick any number of positions that we would be better equipped to recruit if they were getting paid more. So, let's take 5. Good? Check, check. Back in session. Okay, I'll open it up. Who wants to talk about what next?
I'm willing to, go ahead and start up.
Yes, sir.
So before we went on break, you mentioned, Mr. Chair, that, giving one class of people a pay raise without another class of people getting something totally different probably isn't the right way to go. Now, on page 2 of 4, on the handout we were looking at, in the middle, it says changes in pay. Okay? And we start off with literacy coaches getting an additional $6,500 a year. SPED inclusion IAs, $1 an hour. SPED self-contained IAs, $2 an hour. I have no argument with either one of those. A counseling registrar, 2 of them at $3,350 additional a year. One network administrator changing to a system administrator at almost $10,000 increase in his pay a year. And then, of course, the nurses that Mr. Worcester had talked about. So I just want some more information on these, with the exception of the SPED. I think we've already gotten that.
Yep, absolutely. So for the middle school reading interventionists, changing them to literacy coaches actually expands their contract by 1 month. So they're not getting an increase of pay, except for the fact that they're giving also more work. So it's not increasing their current hourly rate, it's just paying them for an extra month. That means that they would be able to work in the month of August? Yes. In the month of August, I was thinking July, August, so that they can prep for the students returning to school and have those literacy plans already in place. Okay. The same is true of the counseling registrar. Again, their pay is not going up on an hourly rate. This would be taking them from, the 2 at the high school would be taking them from 11 to 12 months. Right now, they are off during the month of July, which is when we have some of the busiest time in our counseling departments with enrollments and transfers at the high school level. And so those 2 are really contract changes. We're extending their contract by a month, and that's how much it would cost to extend that. The only one that you'll see on the next page is an increase, but that's also a title and responsibility change. So it's not just increasing the pay for the individual who's doing the same job. Their job has really morphed over the last 10 years, I think, since it's been in place, maybe even longer than that, past decade. And so instead of just overseeing the computer systems and networks previously, which is why it was a network administrator, they're now ensuring compliance with cybersecurity regulations, which is a huge piece of our world now that didn't exist 10 years ago. So protecting us against hackers, making sure that all of the safety and security pieces of technology tie in well, our camera systems for safety and security. So all of those things were not in place or nearly as advanced in that decade ago. And so this is changing the broader scope of that person's responsibilities and paying them for such.
Okay, just, Ms. Sullivan, offline later, if you could just, let me know what that person's pay would ultimately be. I just want to see, in that type of profession, what
absolutely.
It compares to. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Well, we kind of lost we're still on page 2, but.
On page 2, if nobody has anything else on change in pay, I would like to go to supplements and stipends. Any objection?
No, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. The one thing I'm looking at, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows where I'm going with this, the CPR trainer stipend. Is that going to be for a certified CPR course, which is a 2-year certification, or is it just basic training with no certification?
So the CPR trainer stipend would be for the one individual in our division that would be responsible for certifying or training based on the requirements of that person or the need of that person to receive that level of certification. So that person would be a certified trainer in CPR so that they could certify At the highest need, which would meet the school board's requirement to have certified CPR, as well as the federal regulation to have a certain amount per building. And then it would also satisfy our licensure requirement of our teachers, where they all have to, on a 10-year rotating cycle, at least receive hands-on training related to CPR. So it would satisfy both of those requirements.
Okay, well, CPR certifications are only good for 2 years.
Yes, so this person would be paid on an annual basis to recertify those people.
So this isn't, make sure I'm understanding this correctly. This is a certified BLS CPR instructor.
Yes.
That would provide CPR training, whether it be American Heart, Red Cross, American Safety and Health Institute, for a 2-year certification based on current medical standards.
Yes.
Thank you.
That was easy, Mr. Wooster. Thank you. What else you got?
May I say, I really appreciate y'all having the correct responses to that. I think I speak for all of us.
We're ready for page 3?
Let's roll on to page 3.
All right. I'll start. Where to go? Go ahead. Anybody. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, it's back to me again. Keep in mind, I graduated in 1986, so I'm old school. So I'm looking at the first line under purchase services for transportation, additional funds for chartered transportation in a sum of $4,500. In the grand scheme of things, $4,500 is not a lot, but do we really need a chartered service, or could we utilize a school bus?
If the fleet, Mr. Wooster, was up to par, I would easily say to use one of our buses. We would always like to use one of our buses and one of our drivers. With the basis of how we're sitting today with the fleet, we do not feel comfortable sending students to places, let's just say, sometimes over 90 miles, or which 4 or 5 hours. Yeah, 4 or 5 hours away for a state championship. So that's why it's easier to just take a chartered bus. But getting the fleet where we need to get the fleet to, then yes, it will be very, very easy to do that. But as you stated, moving forward with the 5 buses every single year, it's just going to be a couple of years. It's going to be 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years before we get the fleet to that level. But we're moving forward to that. But until then, we have various high schools that are winning state championships on a regular basis. And as Ms. Guest just pointed out, the location for those items are nowhere near here. So that's why we have it there.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but in the back of my mind, did we have a dedicated school bus for overnight trips or things like this in the past?
I don't know about now. I don't think so, Mr. Wooster.
Okay. Unless anybody wants to jump in, I'm just going to finish this page. Moving down, and I know we've had this conversation before, dealing with transportation and the engine replacement, replacing one per year in the amount of $35,000. To me, it's a little bit difficult to predict when an engine is going to fail. And like I said, we've had this conversation, especially if you're dealing with, a diesel engine, barring catastrophic failure. If that engine is worn out to where it needs replacement, then I would argue that the bus itself is worn out beyond repair, because diesel engines last forever. Can you kind of elaborate on that one?
Yes, sir. As you stated, the diesel engine lasts a lot longer, and then most times, if it fails, then it's the replacement of the entire bus. But $35,000 is a lot easier to get your hands on than $150,000 in terms of working within the budget. So we're using sometimes engines and getting the new engines and putting them in buses that are past their lifetime. And that's what we have been doing before, and that's what we're doing now until the fleet service can get caught up. So we have in the foreseeable future, we're going to continue to have to replace engines and different things. And although the majority of the fleet is diesel, we still do have those propane buses. We have one bus replacement engine at this time, but this year alone, we did perform two bus replacement engines, one on a propane bus also.
When do we expect to start seeing the new buses?
We will have the first 5 in from last year this time in April. They're coming in actually early. We have the two, but right.
Okay. Yeah, because I admit I do have concerns on this one. Number one, I don't know how you can budget predicting you're going to replace an engine each year. And number two, again, what I've already said, that if a diesel engine is worn out, barring catastrophic failure, I would say that the bus is history as well.
Right. So that would, in that case, and the engine does fail on the buses, then we would have to start slowly, once again, reducing the buses and waiting for the 12 to 18 months in order to receive another bus in. You know, instead of just putting them to the side, pulling out $35,000 and replacing the bus engine and getting the bus open. I don't think anyone disagrees with you. $300,000 miles on an engine is the same as 300,000 miles on a bus itself. But at the same time, what can get us through the year? That's what we're looking at right now. Although we're in better shape than last year, but it's still, the mindset is what can get us through the year.
Now, hypothetically speaking, let's say you did put a new engine in a bus, and in 100,000 miles, the bus is history. It's wore completely out. Have you already got plans in place to take that engine back out and keep that as a spare in the event you need another one?
I would have to talk to Mr. Sullivan about that in detail, but based off the knowledge I know about Mr. Sullivan, he does have a plan to pull that engine out and auction off the bus and make sure that that engine is ready to go for another bus.
Yeah, I would hate to take an engine that's only got 50 to 100,000 miles on it and just let it go off at an auction with an old bus.
I can get a little bit more information, but I doubt that seriously, Mr. Woods, he would allow that to occur. Everything that we push off to an auction is literally, we cannot even resell it. Sometimes we try to resell it in local, more of the local auctions and different things, and it cannot be resold because of the amount of parts that we have taken off of it and stripped it.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Moving down. Okay, the MyView school bus tracker. I'm looking at this. It's 14. I need my glasses. It's 14,800, and it says the cost is 126 annually for each bus. Looking at the number of buses that we currently have, I don't know if you're basing it on future buses, but looking at the 62 buses we've got, that comes out to like $7,812.
That is correct. The installation fee for the beginning of the service is going to be higher, and then every year will go down. And this is for the overall tracking of the buses.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, just so you're aware, I've had citizens in the county, parents, actually email me pertaining to this.
Yes, sir.
And I've got some security questions for you.
Okay.
As with any, I'm assuming it's an app. I don't know anything about this device, but I'm assuming that it would be an app that can be utilized on your phone. Is that correct?
That is it for the parents to be able to track the buses. Yes,
right. Sir. My main concern on this, how secure is it? Because you know how today's world is. You know, you've got child predators, and everybody has access to the networks.
Right.
How secure of a device is this? Because we don't want that tracking system getting into the wrong hands.
Right. And Of course, I can't go into the overall how secure is it. Will anyone break into the device? Go right ahead. But overall, go right.
Make sure this is on. Good evening, Mr. Rooster. I actually have met with the company a couple of times with Mr. Fike, and the app, they just signed all their security paperwork, so they have several security certifications. You can also not receive access to view the bus on several different security levels. One is you have to have a student at the school. Two is you have to have a student on the bus. Three, you receive an invite code to be able to view the bus. And four, you can only see the bus when it's in a certain range of your home.
So it does have built-in redundancies?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because that was my main concern. It sounds to me like it's a very good program, especially with parents. Like the way my kids were, it was difficult to get them up in the mornings, and if you can track that bus, okay, you know exactly when it's coming. So that's what I wanted to find out. If it wasn't a secure system, I had no intentions of supporting it, but if it is secure,
Me neither.
it sounds great. That's all I've got on that part.
Yes, sir.
What was the
Mr. Cunningham.
range?
Ms. Perkins.
What was the range? So they can only see it within a certain amount. Like how much? Are we talking like a 5-minute heads up or?
I don't want to speak out of turn. They showed me a demo of it, and it was not far. I want to say on the demo we were watching, it might have been a mile, but I can't say for certain.
You good?
I can look into that for you, though.
Okay, I've received an email from a parent who said he likes it and he wants to see it. What I'm interested in, I'm concerned about security also. How many divisions in the area already have this? Or
I would have to speak to Mr. Fike. I was only checking on security and meeting with the company to ensure they complied.
Okay.
I will speak to Mr. Fike.
I don't know the exact amount, but I can't. I don't want to mention another district or another division, but there is at least another division who introduced this to superintendents at a superintendent's meeting. So at least another division or divisions are using this.
Okay.
And I did ask Dr. Coleman and Mr. Fike to prepare, and Mr. Cooprider, I suspect as well, to prepare an update at some point to introduce more pertaining to this. But yes, the division that is using it is finding success, and I think parents are pleased with this additional level of security.
Okay, that was a question. Plus, I mean, that's the biggest question. What other division is using it? I don't have to know specifically, but if they're having any problems, what the problems are they being worked through, and also how long has this system been out? Has it been out a year? Has it been out 5 years? That kind of stuff. And if something's going to be prepared for us, I'm all for it, because the more information we get, the parents will hear about it also, and they can either support it or not support it, but we're representing them.
Would either of you speak to the capabilities, their different levels of usage that we can subscribe to? I mean, Dr. Comey, we were actually meeting with Mr. Fike earlier today.
He's talking about the differences between Zonar,
ridership.
MyView, and
Okay,
ridership.
so there are several levels of, it's referred to as a ridership system.
Right.
The one we're viewing at is called MyView, and that's where you can see the bus.
Right.
If your student is on the bus and you attend the school and it's within a range, you can see the bus. There's an increased option, I don't know how else to word that, where you could have children checking in and off buses. That's referred to as straight student ridership. That's obviously a more expensive and more intense version.
Right. It's more of a badging system going in and going off of the buses.
But that tells you whether or not a specific student is on a bus if they haven't lost their badge. Because
And
obviously transportation would not say you're not allowed to come home because you dropped your badge in the lunchroom.
And those are some of the things that Dr. Kramer were mentioning, as he said, the hurdles that the other division have worked through. So we will be reaching out to the other division and seeing the items that work, the hurdles, and how did they come around this and get to the point that they're loving the entire system. So we will work through that slowly, same way we did weapons detection, the same way we're going to do this. Take our time, work through it until we can figure out a way.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Yeah,
And I'll let
Dr.
Mr. Fike know your questions as well.
Dr. Coleman, yeah, Ms. Perkins and I have talked a little bit about this, and we probably want to talk with you a little bit more offline.
Makes sense.
We've got a few ideas. I like the second one that you mentioned, where the child badges in and off the bus.
Yes, sir.
I think that provides a little bit more security.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, less likely to have a kid go wander off, if we will.
No problem. We'll set up a meeting.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Are we losing anything in the initiation, I guess, for lack of a better word, fees that go along with it if we do the base and then later on we're able to add
No,
the
ma'am.
child tracker?
The Zonar system is the base system anyway, so no matter what, you would have to go through the Zonar system. So whether you're going to get the ridership or you're going to get just the map view looking at the buses, either way, you have to get that base.
And that should just be one time, even if you
That's
add on
going to
the
be a
extra.
one-time installation, yes. Oh, no.
All right. We ready to go on the next page? One more? All right.
I've got one more. This is basically just seeking an explanation for CTE travel and training. It's $5,000. Says changes in VDOE, CTE, charters, and curriculum. Is this simply the curriculum itself?
Yeah, that's for training, additional training for any new things that we happen to do with CTE. Like Mr. Miller has done quite a bit of training
Right.
for welding. So it's just, we have had more training, and so we're asking for a little bit of an increase to cover that. Some
Okay.
of it we can cover through the Perkins grant, but not all of it.
Okay, it's just the way it was worded. It kind of threw me
It's
off.
a little wonky, you're right.
Thank you.
All right. Next page. Everybody, we good? All right. I'll lead this one off if you don't mind. Can you talk to the office supply distribution? I understand that was done a little bit differently in years past, and you guys have kind of restructured that.
I don't believe that the schools themselves have gotten an increase for instructional materials and other supplies in some time. So we were looking at this by we estimated 175,000, but we're distributing it based on the number of pupils. And then going forward, like for this next budget year, we would look at, we would establish a per dollar amount for staff development, for supplies, so that every school knows up front, this is how much you're going to get. And I think that was used here many years ago. But this one here, so this is allocated based on the staffing or pupil count as of October, I believe.
Seems like a significant amount of change, a change there. And I'm not saying they don't need it. I'm just sped $45,000. If they didn't have it this year, what didn't they get to buy? I guess is the question.
Well, as you'll see there, this says the SPED IO Grow program. So
Right.
if you recall when we talked about that earlier, the tuition that is paid on that amounts to about $90,000 a year. And of that, the amount for materials, equipment, as well as the stipends that are paid to those folks hadn't been included on the expenditure side of the budget previously. So those expenses have been coming directly out of Ms. Magner's SPED budget. So this was just making sure we identified this source of revenue and the matching it to those expenses.
So just pick another school. We'll just say Carrollton, the 18,000. They were pulling those. I'm assuming they're not buying anything new. They were pulling out of some other fund.
Yeah, I would like to respond to that. So the schools get instructional funds and they get money for staff development to use as they need to. So for example, art supplies, music supplies, PE equipment, recess equipment. That is all purchased from the schools individually. So if they want to do a music program for the holidays, they are buying that $2,000 or $3,000 program. We don't tell them what to buy. That's their discretion to purchase. But that's what these funds cover. They have not had an increase. I literally cannot even remember, and I've been here a long, long time. I cannot remember the last time they received an increase. And as you know, everything has gone up in cost. So even to cover the art supplies in a classroom, they're struggling to meet all of those needs. So this is long overdue. Even to send their teachers to any sort of conference, they really are not able to do that. They are sending a handful of teachers to any conference a year now. They don't have the money.
I get it. I got 2 of them in school, and I've had a handful of notifications from teachers. Hey, anybody who can pony up X, Y, and Z, please do. And it could be any number of things. So
yeah, and so what happens is, if they're not doing that, teachers are paying out of their pockets for things. We do not want them to do that.
I don't think any of us want that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I got. Anybody else?
I'd like to go back up one line to the 2 AEDs annually. I know with the AEDs, the lifespan is roughly about 10 years. I don't know what the age of the AEDs we currently have. Are they aging out? What is the reasoning for the 2 AEDs annually?
They are, you hit it right on the head, Mr. Wilson. They're aging out at this time. Now, we did purchase a large bulk of AEDs just to ensure that we're in compliance. But at the same time, we did have a lot of batteries that had died out. The pads had expired, just different things of that nature. So with the existing ones, what we'd like to do is just try to set more of a life cycle at this time, so we can just count on replacing 2 every single year until we can get back to par with everything that's going on.
Just out of curiosity, has anyone looked into school grants for AEDs?
Yes.
We're talking outside of state and federal.
Yes. What was the last one we received? Was I would have to get back to you on that, Mr. Wooster, but I will say yes, we have received the grant before, and we covered a couple of AEDs with those. Now, it wasn't this year, but it was before. But I would have to get back to you with that information.
I know with some of the grants, you can actually get 1 or more free with a bulk order.
Gotcha. Yes.
So I don't know, you're saying 2 annually, you don't want everything expiring at the same time, because then you end up with a big bulk of money involved. But I'll tell you what, I'll actually dig into that myself.
Yes, sir.
I'll take a look at that. I've got several more on this page if you want me to continue, or if anybody wants to chime in.
Knock yourself out.
Okay, moving down, security, dealing with radio batteries and supplies in the amount of $15,000. I don't know what kind of, I'm assuming portable radio batteries. I know batteries are not cheap. We've got them at work. It's on a conditioner, and we've been using the same batteries now for at least 6 to 8 years. So what are we looking at? 15,000 for batteries. How many batteries, and what are we talking about here?
All right. So these are not only the batteries for the ones that you feel is the, I guess you said the radio that's in the office. We have over 190 two-way batteries throughout the division. Radios, batteries. The batteries connected to the radio. So we have at least 190 of them throughout the division. Some schools have more than others. You're looking at bus duty, you're looking at cafeteria duty, you're looking at individuals that have the radios on the playgrounds, just different things of that nature for safety and security point of view. Now, these have been purchased throughout the years. I don't even know how many years they've went back to. I mean, it surpasses me in the amount of time that I've been here with different radios and different things of that nature. Radios break, and we were at the same time making the schools actually replace their radios. So with the instructional funds. So there's one thing that was coming out of instructional funds was the replacing of the radios, keeping everything moving forward. At this time, we've taken all radios and the consistency of the radios onto the schedule, and we placed those under the security and management, pretty much Mr. Brinkley, to manage all of these radios, and then place the funds under his line item so he can start managing this 100%.
Okay. You wouldn't happen to know what type of radios are, like Motorola's or whatever?
They're
They are Motorola
And do-
SL 360. They're licensed on the FAA frequency for Wight County Schools.
Okay. Is there a charging station that
Yes,
when they're
sir.
not used, you put them right back in?
Yep, reconditioning charging stations are provided for schools that have a very large population. So we don't
Okay.
have one everywhere. And as an FYI, the batteries are, I'm gonna say like $40 a piece. It's
Okay.
just the sheer volume.
Okay. If you're not already doing it, just a suggestion. When you put a battery in service, just date it.
I totally agree, and I do that.
Okay. Good enough.
I haven't done that with these radios, but that's what I do in the radios I'm responsible for.
All right. Good enough. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Next line, vehicle parts. This is the same question going back to the engine, replacing an engine. How do you predict what vehicle parts you're going to need, or are you creating a stockpile for potential breakdowns?
There is no stockpile. If the stockpile consists of 2 or 3 parts on a shelf, then there is a stockpile. But other than that, I believe that you're thinking of maybe 40 different oil filters just sitting there waiting. There's no stockpile. Everything is rotated firmly. These numbers come from actual the standard equation of how much funds will go into a vehicle every single year, based off the year, based off the mileage. So anytime a vehicle is purchased and brought on, then that is what is figured.
Okay.
And one more thing to add, if I may. Once again, this is another area that hasn't had any increase for a number of years, and we've added fleet, to our inventory. So.
Okay. And again, it's just for clarification.
Yes.
I've got one more on this question, and I'm going to lump technology equipment all into the same question. Dealing with Promethean boards. That is a significant amount of pocket change right there. With especially Carrollton, I'm looking at
93.
I believe it's 21 boards.
pre-K through second grade.
Yes, sir.
Okay. With this amount of money, how can you guarantee, and I know guarantee is a broad word here, how can you guarantee the improvement of the education of the students by the use of Promethean boards?
I believe that's a twofold answer, and I'm not going to answer the education piece. However, I do want to point out the financial piece. So the projectors that are currently in place are extremely old. They were bought the first year Dr. Thornton was here, so 2016. So we're talking they're on 8 years, going on 9. Okay. Consumer projectors are more expensive now than they ever have been. I'm talking consumer enterprise projectors. Let me clarify. This is not a projector you would use at your house. It's a projector that would be on, an average of 7 hours a day, 180 days a year. It's significant. It has to have a very robust build. A projector replacement with updated cabling and all the other requirements tends to run somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,000 out of the box, or for a non-currently existing installation, about $2,700. That's all the cabling run through the ceilings, run to a box on the wall. A Promethean board we have negotiated down in the neighborhood of $2,600, and I actually just got word from our supplier today that that may drop slightly. So a Promethean board, while not cheaper than a projector when one goes bad, is in the same neighborhood in a new build. All right? Number two of that is these are network capable straight out of the box as far as educational improvement, which means while a teacher can remotely connect to that board to show their screen, they are not required to. They could be using their computer for alternative tasks. So you can bring up many apps that are built into those boards, and I'm not saying Promethean per se. I use the term Promethean, but it's just the bid that won this year. They have built-in educational apps as well as a built-in web browser, so you can pull up things like various websites, show it to your students. You can have I think it's a 10-point touch screen, which means you could have two students doing work on the board side by side at the same time, which a projector does not allow. So those are some of my inputs on that particular one. Does that help?
Without the Promethean boards, how detrimental would that be to the education of students?
Well, I'd first like to just point out that when you look at schools-to-school comparison, Hardy Elementary has Promethean boards in every room. Carrollton does not. So you've got two schools in our county. They serve same grade levels, but one set of students is getting an entirely different experience than the other. Personally, I feel like that is not correct. The experience is much more interactive with a Promethean board. I was in a classroom this week and they were doing math bingo on the board. And the students go up, they select what they want, they go back, they work the problem, they go back, they hit it, and get the answer. You can't do that on a projector. You can't do that on a regular board. It's very interactive and engaging for our students. So does it help the education? Absolutely. And quite honestly, it is a staple in most classrooms across the country.
I'll echo your point, and I'll put out her name specifically. So my son has Mrs. Snelling, who is a rock star.
She is.
And when I went to see her classroom, I think it was when we did the Crunch Heard Around the World, I asked her off to the side, how do you like the Promethean board? She said she loves it, and she uses it all the time. Yep. So for whatever that's worth, at least one teacher seems to be a huge fan.
Oh, our teachers love them.
So it's not just Hardy that has them. Speak to the disparity. Other elementary schools. I kind of help.
Yes, they don't, but we are not at the point where every classroom has them in every building. Hardy does because we just opened Hardy. At the high schools, for example, we've been able to purchase for math and science classrooms. So one of the things we need to do would be English, history, and elective classes. And so we have been able to do various grade levels or various subject areas in different schools. We don't have other schools that have them completely. And so what we're trying to do is add additional in order to do that. We want to outfit entire schools. So I know that's probably an unrealistic amount, but if we could even start with one school, and if we did one each year, or one grade level each year, it would eventually get us to that point. And like Mr. Cooprider said, if you don't have the Promethean board, let's say we don't have that, well, we're absolutely going to have a projector. He's saying that the cost of the projector is actually going to be greater than the cost of a Promethean board.
A little bit less.
Was it a little bit less?
Little bit less.
Sorry. But minuscule, right?
Huh? Excuse me?
A very small amount.
It's not a whole.
So it really wouldn't be worth adding the projector when you can get a Promethean board and get so much more out of it. And that's the point we're at. We're getting ready to have to start replacing.
Correct.
Maybe you already answered this and I missed it. What is the lifespan on these? So we start getting all of these in the classrooms. What are we looking at for ongoing expenses with them?
So when we buy them, we buy a 5-year warranty. That means we're guaranteed for 5 years. I have contacted neighboring divisions such as Hampton, who has quite a few. They have ones that have run for 9, 10 plus years. It gets variable. Their expected lifespan is about 8 to 10, which is a couple years longer than a projector.
I would like to know the return on investment, basically, in the classrooms where we have them. are these children, are they doing better or are they advancing more than in the classrooms without?
Mr. Collick, I would love to be able to give you a straight answer on that. There are so many variables for how a kid progresses in a classroom. I really would struggle to answer that.
I'm going to have the same question when we get to technology as well. Okay.
That's pretty much what I was getting at as far as, I know we live in a technologically advanced world now. Everything is electronic, but can you attribute these Promethean boards to students achieving not only a good education, but if you want to base it on standards, well above the state level? Not just average, above state level. And I know that's almost an impossible question to answer.
It truly is. What I can tell you is teachers like to use them and feel that it helps engage children more. That's what I can tell you. Numbers to numbers, there's so many variables you could not possibly say it's attributed to that one variable.
Right. And I'm hearing on the flip side, I've spoken to about a handful of teachers, and I've gotten mixed reviews on it. Some say they don't like it. Some say they don't even use it. It's there, but they don't use it. So Mr. Collick worded it much better than I did, return on investment. Thank you, by the way. But that's pretty much what I'm looking at. Is it really worth it to have these and spend that additional funds?
And again, I would just point out that we have buildings that have them, we have children who are using them, and we have children who do not have the access to them, which I think is a disparity that we should try to fix.
Okay, that's all I have on this subject.
Well, on the same page, we've got $165,000 for iPad replacement rotation, $400 per year for 3 grades. So every year we're buying new iPads, new Chromebooks, which to keep this program going we have to do. I get it. But I need to know, are we getting a return on investment on that? When we buy each child a Chromebook or a tablet that they eventually get to take with them, have our scores on it gone up considerably to consider this a good investment? Or if we didn't have those, would the scores still be about what they are right now? Okay, I said the money is not there for everything, so we've got to look very closely. What I'm getting at, are these nice to have, or are these absolutely essential to the learning environment for each kid to have his own, instead of having some available in the schools for the students?
I don't really see it as, are we increasing test scores, as much as I see it as preparing students for the future and preparing them for beyond high school. If we were not doing that for our students, I think they would be ill-equipped when they get to college. We can't assume that every child has access to technology in their home, because they certainly do not. So I do think if we are going to be competitive and prepare our students, it is an absolute must that we have computers and give students computers.
How do we measure that need to do that against all our other priorities that we have?
Mr. Collick, that's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer that one. I will just say that technology is absolutely a need. We must continue with it. We cannot fall behind in that area. And even just, let's think a few years ago with the pandemic. Had we not been where we were, I don't know how we would have functioned. We would have been like other divisions that were really scrambling. But because we already had a good base, we were able to quickly create a virtual school in a matter of a week.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you're saying it's absolutely necessary for us to make sure each child has a school-provided device.
At least
It's essential.
access. I mean, third and up, we have, K2, we allow them to have the iPads.
So in pre-K 2, it's a classroom set of iPads. They do not go home.
No.
Right.
In third and fourth grades, it's a classroom iPad. It does not go home. Fifth grade and above for Chromebooks, I think I said Chromebooks, they have the option to take them home. The design idea is 5 through 8, and then starting next year will be 9 through 12 as well.
Okay.
For the rotations.
I just want to make sure before I say, give my thumbs up, thumbs down, I know, what where our priorities have to be, because, I mean, we got a lot we're asking for in this book.
Yes.
And we're not getting it all.
No.
And there are going to be some things, I think, that we've used over the years that we probably have to stop using. And there's going to be some things we're asking for that we're not going to get. So we really need your help identifying what they are. So
I would say this is one of those, this is a necessity, I think, to continue what we are currently doing. And I'm just going to add this really quickly. Our new reading program, it has a lot of interactive things. Yes, it's a necessity, Ms. Collick. And with that, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mrs. Getz.
I guess I just want to be clear too. I think we had a lot of discussions about like what do we need to cut, and I think it's very imperative of us to take a hard look at the requests that we've had, to look at our budget, to make sure that we have shored up the money that we receive and that we're using that appropriately. But I also I guess my question is, are we in a deficit as a county? Are we worried about needing to cut the requests that we have because there is no funding for us?
No, I don't think we're in a deficit.
Okay.
What I want to be able to do is go in and be practical, okay, with the Board of Supervisors, okay? We're asking for anywhere from, as I read it, $6,809,865 increase down to $3,341,287. That's the range that we're asking for. I honestly, I don't see us going more than, $2.5 million up, okay? And that's going to cover mostly the pay raises, which I know every one of us supports. Are we going to be able to get everything else that we're told here that we need without going up there, to almost an additional $1 million. Okay. Does it mean we're not going to ask for it? No. But what do I expect with my conversations last year with the board and some conversation this year? I don't expect we're going to get what we're asking for.
Yeah, and I think, again, to Dr. Kramer's point in the previous budget sessions, I think that's unfortunate given that we are still funded below the percentage that we were several years ago. We're not close to the 35% in the overall budget that we've requested. And we're talking about taking iPads, and I know that you're not saying that specifically, but when we have to even, consider cutting technology out of students' hands that is a given in every other school district, I want my kid to have access to that. And as a taxpayer here, I'm willing to pay for that. And so I think that that's just something for us to consider in going in and asking for the funds, that we really consider what's worth cutting and what we're taking away from our children and our teachers' experiences.
And that's exactly what we're here for. That was my exact question on the technology. Is there a return on investment? If there is, I'm all about keeping it. But if we're just putting money out to put money out, I'm not for that.
I'm actually glad you brought up the tax issue. I said earlier that, well, I didn't say it earlier, but when we're dealing with the budget, we've got to look at the overall picture. What do the schools need? What do the students need? And we've got to possibly pull from one area to put into another and benefit that. But we've also got to take into consideration the citizens of the county. And talking about taxes, obviously, more and more funding that we receive that the county provides, they're getting it from where? Taxpayers. Not once have I had a person come up to me and say, golly gee, I really hope my taxes go up this year. It's never happened. Mr. Ferry, you gave me the magical number of $670,400, which equates to, for every 600, please correct me if I'm wrong, for every $670,400 that the county provides, that equals a 1 cent per 100 real estate tax. So let's just say you took that 670,400. Have you already done it? So it comes out to the 10.16.
10 cents on 100.
So 10 cents on 100. Well, it depends. How much is your tax going to go up? Personally, I don't want mine going up any more than what it already is. And that's another thing that me personally, I do take into consideration when going through this budgeting.
I think that's well said. Listen, I applaud you all for sitting down there and fielding questions and answering a lot of the questions we already know the answers to. I don't think anyone up here is suggesting that we start cutting technology. What we're trying to say is we have to come up with a prioritized list. And I'll finish by what I started saying is, at least from my perspective, it would be better if the superintendent and staff prioritized instead of Marsh making his assumption of what I think you should cut. And again, I think we should be able to get all this stuff. It's probably not going to happen. Should we ask for it? Not saying we shouldn't. But again, you have to look at the big picture, right? $9.5 million last year. We're looking at, I don't know what the dollar amount of that top 5 is. What is it? Another $9 million. That's nothing to snub your nose at. In my mind, if we can work closely with the county and knock out some of these capital projects that have been deferred for years and years, get that behind us, and then we'll march forward and strive for that 35% in the years to follow. That's my personal vision, and I don't know where everybody else's head is, but that's just how I see it. I'm looking at the long game. I'm not looking right in front of me.
If I may, you know, a lot of these one-time purchases we're looking to do could be, they could use one-time, you know, money that they have, like surpluses that they have on their side of the budget could be used towards these purchases.
That's fair. That's fair. And those conversations are going to happen.
And as we don't control the county's budget, when they look at ours, they generally aren't touching our operating budget. They're going after the CIP. So if we come to them with an operating budget that is higher, we just lost the band room. So that's where our concern is and what we have to prioritize. And I don't know if that means maybe we need to do things a little unique this year and do, here's the operating budget that we absolutely have to have. And this is what we think is still important, and we'd rather maybe lose this than the CIP funding. I don't know the solutions, but we are trying hard and doing our due diligence to dig in to the budget, get questions answered, both for our sake, for taxpayers and Board of Supervisors. So we do appreciate your patience with all of these questions. I'm not done, but it sounds like you want to go.
Well, this is a group decision here. You rock and roll, Miss Perkins.
Okay.
I am hungry, for the record.
Well, that's why I brought a snack. Okay, just quickly on page 28, number 70, there's joint operations. What is that?
That's CSEP and Governor's School, the tuition that we pay.
Okay. Under miscellaneous, number 58, there is a jump that adds another $137,000 or so. What is included in this miscellaneous fund?
The increase that you see there of $137,623, that represents the after-school program.
Okay. I'm trying to read through, sorry. The summer remediation program, that is on page 27, not item number, or program 600. What is that? It was 91,000, went to 18,500, went up to 88,000. Do we know what that jump is all about?
It's because it wasn't budgeted in fiscal year '25.
We still had summer school. It just wasn't budgeted in the appropriate line.
Okay. When I'm going through here, I see that we have the 4 pages that includes this 11% increase, but I've also noticed, if my quick math was right, I believe it's 7% is already in this proposed budget. So there's increases in here for something, and then we have, what, maybe 5% more in this 4-page thing where...
No, the grand total on the 4-page summary of 6.8 million of the operating budget, that is 5.826. The one thing that is separate would be the textbook local match of 309,000, because that's on a different fund.
Okay, bringing that up, you have this as a new thing. Was this included in the budget last year?
Not in the separate textbook fund.
So in the 2025 budget, there's around $300,000 for the local match for the textbook fund.
Well, it's not specific to the local match is not specific to the textbook fund. As long as the county meets the local required contribution, then we get those textbook funds. So this is just the way that the budget has been done here, of having a separate textbook fund and moving the local match separately to the textbook fund.
Okay.
I don't think I explained that very well, but
So
I did add it as an addition this year. Yes.
it comes into our operating budget, but we move it to the textbook fund.
We can do that, but this, I'm doing it as an addition.
Got it.
Okay, page 27, program 200. What is the special programs?
That's special education, SPED.
Okay. I think I'm good.
You good to go? Ms. Cunningham, good. Mr. Collett? Mr. Wooster?
I got one. This is more for my own knowledge, again, going back to me being old school, graduated in '86. With all the technological advancements we've got, what textbooks do we currently use?
Yep. We purchase textbooks for dual enrollment classes that the colleges, that Camp College requires. We purchase those. Usually every year there's changes in the dual enrollment textbooks, or if we add new dual enrollment courses. So we can spend anywhere between $20,000 to $50,000 for textbooks for dual enrollment. With that money, we have a lot of online programs and supplements that we use, and so those all come out of the textbook fund.
Okay, I was just curious. Back when I was in school, generally students had one arm longer than the other for carrying books all day.
Yep.
So,
and we still have some of those, but a lot of them are online now.
Yeah, just, traveling through the schools, I have yet to see a student carrying a book.
They exist, I promise you, but they are not like what you and I remember now.
Thanks.
My little girl carries a backpack that weighs as much as she does. It's funny. It's got binders full of paper. Yes. It's funny. Anybody else?
If I may,
You may, ma'am.
on page 26 of the budget document, there is the summary by functional area of the expenses, and in the third column, it shows the full-time equivalent positions. Well, after I did this, I realized that I forgot to add in the new positions that we are proposing. So I've asked Mrs. Whitlow here to just provide you this page so you can see that there's an additional 15 FTEs that should have been in there. The dollars have always been in there. I just forgot to adjust those FTEs. Now you know I'm human.
Almost perfect.
Now you've got my attention drawn to it. Why does it skip the sequence, the function sequence? It goes from 64 to 67.
65 is food service.
Okay.
66 is facilities.
Anything else you want to add? Are we missing anything?
No, sir, that's all.
Dr. Kramer?
No, we appreciate the dialogue and look forward to any other questions you might have between now and our next work session.
Yeah, so I'm sure between now and next Thursday, there'll be a plethora of questions and dialogue coming from each of us to most of you. I look forward to hearing from the public. I'm sure we're going to hear quite a bit. It's that time of the year. And again, I applaud your passion and your advocacy for funding. There's no easy answers. No one's going to be happy all the time. We got the tough decision of figuring out how to prioritize it. And then our friends down the road have the tough decision of figuring out how much they can afford to give us. So we'll just leave it at that. Any alibis? We're good?
Got one.
Yes, sir.
I would like to thank the Carrollton staff and students for the lovely flowers you've given us.
Yes, sir.
That's the only thing I have.
Yes, sir, indeed.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, just real quick, for the staff, I know I've just got one. For the staff here, I just want to apologize for not being here at the previous meeting. It was unavoidable due to work, and I want to thank Mr. Marsh here for clarifying that at the beginning of the meeting. So hopefully it will not happen again.
One team, one fight. Let's call it a night. Thanks, everybody.